We're going to our meeting over here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Yes. Great.
Good morning, all. Call the meeting to order for the Utility Policy Committee, Thursday, September 14th, 2023. The next item is to set the agenda. Any corrections or additions? And James Baker will be here, but he's in traffic. 94. He'll be a little bit late. No changes, a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Support, David.
Motion by Peter, support by David to set the agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Introduction and guests. I believe we're all known here. I don't know if we need to go through this again. Even online, I think everyone is,
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff. I just want to let you know I'm probably going to have to step away for a little bit at 9 o'clock. We have a construction meeting here at my office that I have to be in. So if I don't respond if somebody asks me a question, it's that I'm not caring. It's just I won't be by the camera. So thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 is acceptance of the August 10th, 2023 draft minutes.
Move to accept. Who was second, Hefner?
Moved by Jim, second by Cheater. Accept the August 10th minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item 5, public comment. Any comment this morning? Okay. On to item 6, unfinished business. The water connection fee, system capacity buy-in fee, and this is continued discussion. We have the water contract amendment, and that was emailed to the members this morning. It's available here if anybody wants a copy of that. We have some hard copies. Could you pass those more? So in this hard copy, it shows the changes, and they are in a lighter gray underline. So, for example, on page 2, the definition of the system capacity buy-in fee is there. It shifts all of the numbered definitions. And there are 2 other places where it's changed. On page 8, item 12 defines the authority of this UPC committee in regard to the system capacity buy-in fee. The UPC's role being to review, analyze, and revise the methodology periodically. 19. Listed as one of the other water system revenues. These were drafted by the attorney, reviewed by the city attorney, so all are in agreement on these proposed language changes to the amendment. To the water agreement. And then the appendix F, which is the actual methodology, is still under construction. And they're close to the group working on that as close to having that done.
Yeah, we got together, gosh, was it last week?
Last Thursday?
Yeah,
Last Friday? Right?
Yeah, last week we got together with the REIT consultant and UFC consultant and James and Steve and I and Danica from Stantec as well as another associate there. And we kind of walked through some concepts and changed some numbers just to be more reflective of the audit. And then there was some homework done since then, and I believe we're going to get together again. And so we're pretty close to having some resolution to this would be a methodology to bring to this group and explain why and say this is an approach that we feel that's appropriate.
Thank you. And then we also have a succinct memo describing what the system capacity buy-in fee is and the purpose. And then the goal is still the January 1st implementation. So discussion on this. Or any questions?
That was in what was sent out or not?
Yeah.
That was it. Okay. Oh, that wasn't sent out. It was emailed? Yeah, it was emailed.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
it wasn't in the board packet. Let's get off of it.
It's back there.
Yeah. That's okay. It's actually the city and the townships who amend the water agreement. But we need to know the role. So
There's no action we need to take then, right? Other than just the discussion is that, or
I think
do we need to make a motion to?
we're looking, that's a good question. I think we're looking for a recommendation.
To the cities and townships.
Well, they can't, I don't believe you can, we're not at the point to approve a change to the contract because the methodology for the calculation is not in the contract.
Right.
But perhaps, I don't know what we would, just, do we say we're proceeding in that direction and at the next meeting we would approve a methodology provided in advance and then provide that to the city and the townships? I'm not sure we need to take any action, Jane, but.
Yeah, I think if the UPC is willing to do so, you could approve the contract language amendments as a recommendation to the city and to the township members. And then you could approve Appendix F, which will bring forward to you and complete in October.
Right. And at that point, they would approve the change in the contract, right?
You could do that as well. You could approve both items.
At the same,
At the
so
same
we
time.
still have more to do before we change the contract, so I'm not sure we need to do something, but I could be wrong.
I think we should do both at the same time, wait until next month.
And that works with the schedule to take the wellhead protection, et cetera, to the township.
Yeah, because I'm going to be sending that out probably next week to the townships.
It looks like we're moving in the direction we wanted to move in, right? So pretty simple, really, in the contract.
Yes. Okay. Item E is the capital improvement program, integrated program review. And just a reminder that, so the townships have submitted all of the capital projects to the city, and that's required by the contract every 7 years. I don't know who wants to.
So yeah, those have been submitted to the city, and I see somebody sent out the capital improvement plan. I don't know if that was James. I only had time to briefly look at it, and I do see some of those projects I believe got put in there. Okay, so I didn't study it. I don't know if you're prepared to look at it here, or it's a pretty hefty document, Excel spreadsheet. Maybe it'd be, if people are willing to look at it or study it, and I'm happy to do it. I just didn't have the time to do it. And then talk about it, have a presentation at the next UPC meeting. Are you prepared to do that today, or?
I can introduce it today and perhaps gain some familiarity with it. It is a very large document. I mean, it's a very big program, and on average, over $30 million a year capital program is not going to fit on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It's just not going to happen. So, all the community projects that were submitted and all the townships are in the capital plan. It's a long range capital plan, so it's spread out over several years. We've got, every project listed on there. So I can share my screen if that's preferred.
I think that would be good.
All right, that seems to be working there. So I'm going to zoom way in here, and it should start to be able to. So we've got all the projects listed kind of in a row, moving down row column format. So you could go through and you can just kind of see all the projects here. So as we just go down, you could look for a specific project. You could just look through all these projects individually, but they're all listed. DWSRF projects, those would be really our plan focus for lead removal, and some other big water main improvement and station improvement projects are all grouped separately. We group the DWSRF projects separately because they have different bonding and funding mechanisms. They usually are heavily influenced by grants. Just to talk about that program real quick, it's something we apply for every year. We don't necessarily get it every year, but when we do receive the award, we usually receive a heavy amount of grant funding. So we just closed on $20 million of project work for 2023, and that had over $15 million of grants for principal forgiveness within it. So we kind of show those projects differently as we present the capital plan. We've got separate tabs for the township neighborhood projects, so you can see where those are all listed. Those all feed into their reference, and they feed all into the capital program overall. I'm going to just kind of go through here and show you the year aspect of it, so you can see where the planned year that we plan to do the project is.
And James, this is on the web, correct?
We will place it on the web right now. This has been emailed to all UPC members, vice members, and our regional partners, I believe. Go through here, see kind of the years. So we've got kind of your first 5 years here in front of you. And then as you kind of span down, you'll see the projects kind of pick up. So to see what year a project is in, you look for the project name and then reference a year. And it's a little like playing bingo, but you got to see dollars in that year. So if there's dollars on your project in that year, that's when it's going to go. A lot of times you'll see 2 or 3 years of funding, and that usually takes 2 or 3 year projects. And so we'll usually start in that last year where that funding is showed in those columns. To summarize, I got everything kind of summarized at the top with a 5-year rolling average. You see around 35 million, 33 million at 2028. So that's kind of that top line number. That would be our projected total capital program if every single project were executed exactly on time. That's not a real world example, so that's why we only plan to fund approximately 70% of these projects. So with 34, $35 million, we would look to fund through bond proceeds somewhere between 21 and $24 million of bonds. And that is in line with where we've been historically for the last 3-year period. And that's where we've, from our FAMS model and our rate projections, that's where we projected that we would be. So, rates are all based on the bond sales to support the projects. And we couldn't execute $35 million a year of projects to just things that happen. And all these projects get off the ground. Some of them are delayed in permits. Some of them are delayed property acquisition. Some of them are coordination issues where we identified we were going to do a project, but we've got to move it around a year to align with MDOT or Road Commission. So there is some lead lag things that impact, project execution schedule. We also, in terms of the DWSRF projects, which are shown as a different line item, if those aren't approved for state funding, we're just going to push the project out another year, restructure the project plan to try to be more competitive, and then reapply for funding next year. So if something doesn't happen in DWSRF, it's just going to get pushed out 1 or more years until it does happen.
Question for you, James. So in that top line, 35 million approximately, that includes that DWRF component?
No,
It doesn't.
it does not. So it's very similar to what we showed last year, where we were 60 million, including DWSRF.
Okay.
That's also shown. So the top line, I'll zoom in on it here. The top line is about $35 million. The top line is the 5-year average. The first line below that is the actual year number. And then the orange line is the total, everything, including DWSRF.
Okay. And if you work your way down, that first component is pretty much, would you say like production? The first capital projects in blue, underneath that's like all water production activity, or?
So we sort the projects out by different category. We have production, wells, and plants as a category. We have.
Is that the first category?
No, it looks like the first category would be like our WAD 05, which is transmission, distribution, valves, hydrants. So you see hydrant replacement programs.
Yes.
And then you're just going on down the list, valve replacement, lead service program, that's the in-city program. That would be a WAD 06, but we've grouped it with the WAD 05s. It's just what the water infrastructure components that are transmission, distribution. It's like out system components.
Okay.
And then as we go down the list here, those are individual name projects, Fellows Court, Newport, Academy, Prairie, Inkster, all the way down. That's all water main, either distribution for transmission, all still water main. I'm scrolling down, all still water main, scrolling down, all still water main.
So that first group's kind of global, and then you have the specific.
Yeah, the first group
Trees or
would be like
whatever.
programs,
Okay,
like our lead program, our hydrant program. Those are all just main programs. And then as you scroll down where I'm at right now, individual street names, that's the actual project. And this is a big group. There's, 829 miles of water main, and, that's a lot of water main. So it's got to have a replacement schedule. And there's growth happening as well. So those are sprinkled in. We're now in a station. So you see a bunch of stations listed here. These would be our Watt 200s, Watt 02. And that has like station 24, station 38, all the way down. All the stations listed out. And then you got some pipelining projects. We've separated out the DWSRF loans, and then we're kind of
just a strange question for you, James. You were gonna put in place like we buy that pipe so we can make the projects happen when we want them. Is that working, or has that, is the pipe arriving and that's gonna work out? So
Yeah,
these will happen?
Yeah, that was successful for our like 22 and the 23 capital programs. We've got a bunch of pipes sitting in the field. That's all here on deck, ready to go into the ground. We're seeing that supply chain challenge has started to resolve itself, and our projects for 23, 24 in the next year, we don't plan to procure water main ahead of the project. So that looks like that was an acute issue that we were able to resolve to keep projects moving forward. So as we get into a lot of these that are shown here as new, will probably just be conventionally awarded to a contractor, and the contractor will be required to, furnish and install that water main.
Okay.
James, just a couple quick questions here. So talking about the 70% getting done out of what's budgeted, then does that 30% undone roll over to the next year?
Yeah, so, if you look at all these projects, it's like a turtle race, if you will. And you go, and all the projects go out, and some of the turtles jump the lane and go to the other lane. Some of the turtles just sit there and do nothing. Some of the turtles go backwards. Some of the turtles are, picked up by a kid or something else. And then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, well, how many turtles finish the race? In our case, about 70%. And that's been a pretty good average over the last 3 or 4 years. And they're all accounted for. Eventually, they will get done in future years. So depending on some of the projects that don't get off the ground right away, they might get completed next year or a year or two later. But overall, broadly speaking, they all eventually do get done. All the turtles are collected and carried forward at the end of the race.
So year 2, you've still got some of the lanes filled with turtles who are still there from year 1.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you can't get year 2 turtle in that lane because you got to wait for year 1 to finish? And so does that become an accumulating thing?
Right.
Once you get 3-4 years down the road, you're like literally, you push your whole schedule back.
Push your whole schedule, yeah. So the good thing about the way we've been bonding with, Mr. Pacinzi and what he's been managing for a program for us is bringing in those dollars, but not assigning those dollars when they come into specific projects. So we do have the autonomy if, say, a project was, assigned dollars on paper, it didn't go anywhere, it's not encumbering anything. So the new dollars can then go to an active current project. And that way is done. The bonds on the open market are done that way to, keep the projects that are moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I assume bond rates are up now.
Yes.
Yeah. So is that another thing we're managing is, let's say things even out or start to drop? I mean, in a certain number of years, do we have the opportunity to finance those things for a lower rate, or once we got them at that rate, that's just it for the life of the bond?
We can refinance, typically after 7 years.
7 years?
Yeah. And we can even do an advanced refinancing if rates were to suddenly drop overnight. You know, you can do that calculation, work with our bond consultants and our bond counsel, kind of help us keep track of all those things on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
So, yeah, right now, obviously, rates being high, who knows where they'll be in 7 years, but there's a high likelihood we'll be refunding a lot of these bonds in the future.
Yeah.
You know, looking back to the last 5 years, I think it was 2019, 2020, 2021, we refunded everything that we had on the market that we could. And so those things just kind of come and go in cycles as we move forward.
Yeah. And so then back to our total bond, because it's very ambitious. We always talk about all this work. Well, what's the trajectory relative to our capacity for continuing to pay those bonds back and do the new work? I mean, do we hit some point where it's like?
Yeah, I would say what's presented in front of you here, if you look at these 5-year trends, this is probably overstated. One of the ways this is overstated is it shows that we're applying for and we're successful every single year with DWSRF. That hasn't been the case in reality. The actual performance of DWSRF has been about 50%. We've been successful about 50% of our attempts or our at-bats with DWSRF. This is overstated. This would show that every single year we apply, that we're getting that full program. So there's that aspect of it. The other consideration is that, you know, this is, again, probably about as high as you could go from a capacity standpoint. And we're seeing that with our bond rating from S&P. We just got a rating. We were a double A-, which is great, but our outlook went from what to
Neutral.
Neutral?
Yep.
Neutral, okay. So, I mean, it wasn't.
Oh, it went from neutral to negative.
Oh, it went from neutral to negative. Okay, so it went from neutral to negative outlook. And the main reason for that is the capital program has shown out in the future does require continuous 7% or 8%. We're still kind of fine tuning that with Stantec rate increases every single year. Right. And if you get out 9 years or 7 years or something like that, coverage ratio would drop if we don't go up a little bit. So I think we're not seeing that as a concern. Okay. We're just seeing that as an indicator that, okay, this is the top of the capacity as shown. Yeah. And to continue that, there's going to be a reliance on the rate increases to continue to support this.
So one last question on that. So I know there's all this huge investment to the tune of trillions and infrastructure and all that. Is that dumping more capacity into pipelines like, you know, the DWSRF funds as well? Is that filtering down that way? So are we seeing more availability that will probably be there for the next couple of years? And after that, who knows what will happen? That could squeeze way down. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
Like the grant funding and that sort of thing.
Yeah. State ARPA.
So with the DWSRF, part of what's happening right now is the state's made an initiative to push a lot of ARPA funds into light service line replacement. That's where we got that 15 million. Yeah. 100% of that project that was proposed, or maybe 90%, was fully grant funded by that ARPA that went into the DWSRF program. So we know that at some point, at least, 2026, maybe sooner, that'll end.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we're being so aggressive right now, is that, we don't want to leave something on the table from DWSRF, state ARPA. There's PFAS dollars. So, one of the projects that we've got, Station 5, that's currently shown in your capital plan as, open market funded. We're going to be pulling that and pushing that into a reapplication for DWSRF. It's not reflected here on this yet, but that's just some of those moving bits and pieces that it would be to our advantage to go after those dollars as opposed to paying for that on the open market bond. Right.
James, before we go away from this, can you describe what the TWP neighborhood project in the narration? In that same, I have no idea.
So yeah, the narration, some programming, wizardry that just kind of goes and tracks how we're applying, the budget allocations and, some cost escalation within this, worksheet to stay current. I wouldn't recommend spending too much time on that. I try not to. The township neighborhoods, this all then this feeds into the CIP. This is just straight cost right now. Tom, I think Anna might have increased the main amounts. If you see, she's using 300, 250 to 300. So that's kind of reflective of what we're seeing in market right now. So this is just kind of all in cost. It doesn't break out, who's going to pay for what or, anything like that. It's just the fully weighted cost. And, it's out there. Well, actually, she does have, she does show greenfield cost in here. So can you see that? Should I zoom in?
Well, the neighborhoods, you've got those plugged into years down the line.
Correct. I believe we've got those referenced, that are going to kind of spread out through years.
Those are probably more like placeholders than real projects. Right. Based on the discussion of the neighborhood policies that we'll have here.
These aren't new neighborhoods, these are existing. Right. So the $90 per linear foot, that is what the city would pay, and they would hope to get grants for the remaining to get to 300.
We're still working on some policy items with the subgroup to identify, ways to supplement the construction and not to go too far into the details on that, but broadly speaking, if you've got an existing neighborhood and, homes are built, people have lived in them for, 20, 30 years or more, the cost of bringing water in a established area is expensive. It, could be $300 a foot.
Gotcha.
At that cost, that those individual homeowners would never make that choice on their own. They would be $30,000, $40,000 to connect a water. And you could get a well for $7,500. So we're looking at possible ways. We're working with a subcommittee of the UPC to look at policy of how to supplement that with what we would call our greenfield price. So if you take 40 acres of cornfield and that becomes 80 or 120 houses, and the excavator goes in and dozers off 5 feet and lays main and then builds houses on top of it, the cost to construct a water main is a fraction of what it is to go into an existing neighborhood. So there's an advantage when you're building new homes in a greenfield environment, and there's a disadvantage when you're going into that. And so that's something that as a utility, we may want to look at a supplement to support, growth in that aspect.
And that's what the $90 a linear foot is.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Item C is the utility financial. Oh. Question on item 6A.3, the proposed implementation schedule for the capacity buy-in fee. We just mentioned that they're still aiming for January 1st implementation.
Which means it's going to have to get to every board
Yes.
before the end of December.
Yes.
6C is the utility financial policy. Review and discussion, and Jeff Chamberlain has been the one who's given us the updates on that, but
I think initially they're out on the website, there is this document, and I think it's referred to as the utility financial policy. And it's discussion and why and how and what the policy might be. And there's actually a resolution. And so there's a lot of stuff. And I suggested, as we are charged with looking at the utility financial policy, that we identify what is it. And so, and then Jeff was looking to see, was it approved? What is it? I think, and I know he's not here, so I'm not going to put words into his mouth. But I guess I would think, we're approaching maybe 6 months of what is it? Is it time for us to say, this is what we believe it is? There is a document in there saying this is like a resolution. It says this is the basic skeleton that we say, this is what we're working off, going forward. Do we take a look at that perhaps at the next meeting, just the summary or move forward somehow to say, what is it? I'm just asking, not telling, that really is how the rates are supposed to be calculated based on that policy. That sets the reserves. And there is a summary, and so do we say, maybe look at it at the next meeting, just the summary. Or maybe there will be some kind of, this is what we do have, or something to say, this is what we're going off of, and this is what they're working with at the city, and this is our perhaps bring it to the city or something of that nature and say, this is what we understand, or this is what, the contract says specific things to do with this. We have input on what it is. We're really just saying, what is it? Do we, move forward in that direction? And we can surely give Jeff a chance to, look again and whatever, but maybe at the next meeting we can say, well, if there isn't something there, can we take this component and say that is it? I don't know that side of it.
Yeah, I think we can definitely, bring back the summary and review it at this table. That's the whole point of our meeting. So,
yeah.
I think we were trying to figure out exactly, what exactly the commission approved. Did they approve the policy as it's written, or did they approve the structure of the policy and then someone wrote that's what we've been trying to work on, determine. Just been out, obviously quite a bit. I've been here the last two meetings, for this meeting, last one. So.
Sure. No, I'm not fine with it. I just thought if we can move it forward, it's been on here every meeting. So
yeah, I think at the very least, it's there. We can look at it. We can look at least the summary and discuss it here.
Sounds good. Any other comments on that? Okay, item D, 6D, the Stantec update on the 2023 water rates.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jim. If Danica is going to share her screen, we're going to take you through really kind of a couple items, recognizing the earlier discussion on the system capacity buy-in fee. But we have continued to work through our processes internally, as well as having discussions with James and city staff. So this is just kind of a quick update where we're at. We have, Danica, if you can go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
We have completed the cost of service analysis, which we had kind of generally discussed with the group in our last session. Just a real quick update on the financial plan, the FAMS model. Some positive news for the group. As part of our normal internal processes, as we build the financial models and work through developing them, we have an independent review process set up with our seasoned people, well-seasoned people who are not on our project team, but very familiar with how we do things, look at it. And we found a little glitch with a sign that we had incorrectly assumed. We validated that to the audit detail, which is is present for us now. The good news is we believe rather than an 8% increase that we've been sharing with the group, that the need is really now only for a 6% increase on the water side. So that James doesn't continue to include the FTE assumptions that we've talked about earlier. That really was the only change to the results, other than some fine tuning on our end to make sure we're comfortable with it. Again, it comes down to us for defensibility. If you ever, God forbid, got in a litigation situation, we want to be sure that our model is accurate and ties out to the best of our abilities. James, I think when we last talked with you, we had looked at initially at that point was a 7%, dropping it from 8 to 7. We're pleased to say we're comfortable with dropping it to 6% based on the results of the FAMS model. So with that, I wanted to then go to kind of the next step for us is the cost of service analysis, which is really a study to determine cost allocation of the financial plan dollars that the FAMS model generates, then figuring out, okay, how are those costs assigned to the respective customer classes, residential, commercial, industrial, et cetera. And that becomes a tool to use in the rate design. And what we're looking for there in the cost of service analysis is to look for respective inequities where a class may be bearing too little or too much of the respective costs. We've reviewed, kind of our results with James. Danica, if you could move to the kind of the quick methodology slide. In essence, what we're trying to do when you assign costs, utilize the industry manuals that are out there, AWWA M1, very similar approach to what Bart has done for you previously. We even had some discussions with Bart, further validating some certain of his assumptions in the prior study. But basically what you're trying to do is to say, first off, what function does that respective cost serve? Is it treatment related? Is it filtration? Is it administrative? Is it customer related, et cetera? And then you use certain accepted industry allocation factors relating to, peak use of the system, average use of the system, et cetera. I won't go into, because it is a very, very detailed process. Danica has been right in the midst of it. But as we move now to actually show you kind of the results of it, this is in summary format. There's a whole lot of detail behind this. But again, as I mentioned, we were looking for anything that appeared significantly out of balance versus, the black column is the projected 24 rate revenues. The orange columns are what we would suggest are the costs allocable to the respective classes. And after kind of working through this, the results indicate to us that there really is nothing significantly out of proportion in any of the particular customer classes. And I always use the analogy that to do a cost of service analysis, it's based on engineering information, it's based on accounting information, but it's really just a tool. It's an art, not a science. Okay. And, our approach followed very, very similar in many respects to what Bart has always done, which made us comfortable in our approach. I wasn't surprised by that, frankly. Bart's done cost of service analysis for I suspect as long as I have, if not longer. But anyways, the summary slide tells us that, we will come through and recommend what we see as, an average percentage increase by class. Okay, that there is no significant subsidy. So, with that, then, that's another major step for us to complete in our analysis. We then now will move ultimately and quickly here once we resolve the system capacity fee calculation. Okay. And just in the interest of moving the meeting along for you, we do need to set up follow-up discussions with Peter and James and Mark Beauchamp to kind of get this reviewed. But Danica, if you could go to, if you would please, the SCF slide.
That one while we're.
Yep.
Can you
And-
go back?
Sorry, Peter, did you have a question?
David here, Jim, just a quick question. So if you look across the bar graphs, it looks like your projected rate revenue runs about 4 million short if you go across all of them, but then it's balanced out at the end. So where does that differential get made up in the totals, unless I'm looking at it wrong?
Yeah, I don't, you would have other revenues that would come into play, miscellaneous revenues, of course, that are over and above rate revenues that would help you cover it, but,
And I think, Mayor, if Jim, if I may, I think, so there's some balancing that occurs. Detector checks, our fire protection program is essentially bringing in more dollars than it costs. So you see there's about $700,000 that are, coming back in on the positive in that program. And then that helps to balance out some of those other programs overall. Also, multifamily is about $200,000 to the positive that are, kind of coming back over. So there's, overall the total program balances, but there are, some variation in some of these classes. I think the important takeaway is to look at how closely matched they are from, from a very high level. They're not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
They never will be. But to see that, overall it is balanced and that, overall they're, very well respect each other. And so that's very good. So, what would be a concern for us if we looked at single family, for example, and we were outpacing costs by say 50%. So, we're collecting something like 9 million for single family, but our cost to serve that group was like 18 and a half.
Yeah.
That would be a concern for us for rate structure, that we would want to take a look at the rates and restructure how we're balancing the rate. So overall, looking at this and how tightly matched those bars are provides some real positive assurance that our rate structure is correct for the work we do and for the service we provide to the customers.
yeah, well said, James. You want to do the next cost of service? Just teasing. Okay, well, yeah, and then in the interest of everyone's time, let me just quickly kind of move to the system capacity fee discussion. We've had a number of discussions. And if you recall, our last discussion on this topic was looking at kind of establishing a point in time year-end 2022 as the basis for calculating it. There since has been some ongoing discussions, and that's what we've highlighted in yellow to include a portion for instance, CIP executed that will show up in 23. And really, and to summarize it, to kind of move it from a point in time on an actual basis of calendar year 2022 to a point in time kind of estimated calendar year 2023. That leads us into some very extensive details and discussions, which, you know, Peter, James, I don't know if Mark Beauchamp's on the call or not, but we would like to set up a meeting for perhaps Tuesday, Wednesday next week to try to talk through this a little further and move this to finalization. At the end of the day, at least from what we're seeing, your charge is somewhere in the ballpark of like 1,500. It might be 1,450. It might be 1,600, depending which of these components you include. So I don't think it's going to be difficult for us to eventually get to the methodology to allow us to, you know, write up Appendix F for you. We just have to have some follow-up discussions. And so, in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. You know, at some point, UPC will have to decide in the city as to where do they want to go with this. You know, in the case of the city, it's a new charge. In the case of the townships, it may or may not be a new charge. It could likely be a revised charge. But you're applying this charge to a limited number of new customers hooking up to your system and buying in essentially to the backbone of the system that's in place. Over and above remember the $6,000 city calculated customer connection fee that all new customers pay. Okay. So I'll stop there. Don't want to bore you with a lot of, you know, the details, but that's kind of where we're at. And, you know, consideration eventually will have to be given once we finalize the methodology with input from James and Peter and perhaps Mark Beauchamp as well. Then, you know, what does UPC ultimately do with this in your system, right? My suggestion would be to, once we give you what we all are comfortable with as a final number, hypothetically, let's say it's $1,500, or let's say it's $1,520. My suggestion for your consideration would be to say, okay, we can justify $1,520. Let's just adopt a $1,500 charge. Excuse me, and then implement that. Okay. And then look at every 2 to 3 years, I would suggest, as part of the ongoing rate work that the rate consultant is doing. But we'll try to get something set up Tuesday, Wednesday type time frame. James and Peter, just a heads up for you, we'll certainly reach out to Mark Beauchamp, anybody else that wants to be involved in the meeting. But it's kind of, to me, comes down to the point, do you stop at year end 22 because that's actual data and just utilize that? Or do you try to get yourself to a point at year end 2023 where you're estimating certain things to get you to year end 2023, recognizing that the charge will go into effect 1/1/2024? Does that make sense to everybody? You know, it's kind of, what's your point in time that you're going to utilize the data? Once we recognize that we've picked up all the pieces correctly, okay? And then ultimately, you know, a concern I always have when these charges are implemented or modified is this does tend at times to become a lightning rod, not so much for customers, but for developers that may work in your area and work in other communities around the area, where I have to say, well, wait a minute, I can do work over here and I only pay a $750 charge and yours is $1,500. That's why we have to be sure that whatever we finalize here is you know, consensus, is it makes sense, And then ultimately, is it defensible if challenged? So with that, I'll stop there. That's kind of an update of where we're at. Just kind of in closing. So we really have two pieces of work left to finalize the individual rates for recommendation, and that would be obviously to finalize Appendix F and the methodology here, and then literally just to give you the unit rates by meter size for ultimate implementation 1/1/24.
So, thank you, Jim. One question. Sounds like the system capacity buy-in fee could be finalized next week. So I think originally we had looked to have the rates at this meeting, so we have a month to review and digest and then come back with the recommendation that we want to make at our October meeting. So by the end of next week, is it possible to have those rates? We do need to get those, I think.
You mean not only the finalization of the system capacity buy-in fee as well as the individual rate components by the end of next week?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I think that's doable on our end. And certainly we can get started on that, assuming the 6% increase. Quite honestly, whether you land at $1,500 or land at $1,000 for the system capacity fee or whatever it is, it's not enough revenue to move the needle as far as the overall system needs. So, but yeah, I think we can have that out to the group by the end of next week for your consideration.
Jim, can you send us those slides?
Oh, definitely. We'll send them along as now. And, Peter, I know, for instance, like the first highlighted yellow item, the executed fiscal year 23 CIP came about as a results of discussion, as I understand it, because I was traveling yesterday, but that was with James and discussions with Danica and Lisa from our team. So, that's a piece you may not have seen, and those certainly things we can step through. So, but yes, we will send you the slides, and work diligently here to set something up for Tuesday or Wednesday with the group to, on the system capacity fee calculation. And then also by the end of the week, we can send out, the proposed rates, as well. Okay.
Yes.
Anything else for Danica and I at this point, or?
No, thank you very much. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to item 6E, the existing developments review policy. Continued discussion.
So we set a subcommittee to look at this last month, a couple months ago. And we've had 3 or 4 meetings. Subcommittee was myself and James, Jeff Chamberlain, Libby, and Hudson. And I sent out in the packet where we have landed so far is a draft up for discussion. And we will be taking this back to the regional commission as well to present to them to get their buy-in. But just if I may, I'll just try to summarize this as quickly as possible. But it really goes to what James had talked about. Existing neighborhoods
Tom,
Yes,
just so everybody, you know, these folks too, because they may or may not see it, but could you give them like the background on it, just, you know, a few sentences saying this is for new stuff?
yes. So this is for neighborhoods that abut or will abut future extensions to the system. They are not system improvements. So generally in the past, the capital improvement plan included transmission, closing of loops, that kind of things, system improvements that improve the system. Did not include serving a neighborhood off of that system. What's that? Existing neighborhoods. And so, so existing neighborhoods, recognizing there's a value to having more customers to extend the system. You know, those customers will be ratepayers forever. But also, as James had mentioned, if those existing neighborhoods, if they have to pay the entire cost to put a water main in there, the average cost of putting water main in an average neighborhood is about $20,000 to $25,000, and per home.
And that's existing neighborhood, not the greenfield or whatever.
Yep, this is all existing. New neighborhoods, the developer's going to pay for that. And that cost will be borne by the people who are buying those homes. And that's why we sort of landed on this greenfield number, that the system would, or the cost to be shared by the people in the neighborhood or the development is a greenfield number, $90 a foot. So that it is equitable between new developments and the people who are buying those homes, and existing developments, people are getting new water. The people in those neighborhoods are going to have to pay about the same. And then the system would pay for the remainder. So it's about a 30-70% split. 30 to the homeowner, 70 to the system. Still, even at that, it's it's going to cost them $7,000 plus $6,000. It's still going to cost the homeowner about $14,000 in today's numbers, which is still a lot versus the cost of a new well.
Plus,
It'd be about double the cost of the new well, you know, on average, there's different variance.
still good value.
Yes. And again, we don't know, we're developing this policy, bringing these numbers out based on sort of this rationale. We may get no takers, you know, neighborhood may say, yeah, I want to spend $14,000, but at least we can start there and see where it goes.
You can't force anyone to tap in.
So let me just go through it.
Yeah.
So the idea would be that we would ask for, because there is going to be system cost, that we would ask that there's evidence that 50% of the neighborhood would be in favor of that, or that the township has some other rationale that indicates that, you know, if they only get 30%, but there's other reasons. There's got to be rationale that they either want it or we should put money, we shouldn't invest money to put it into the neighborhood. We put together cost estimates of that, bring it to the UPC so we understand what that implication would be. And again, the funding part of it is that the homeowners would pay about the same as the new development, 30% of the cost of it. The system would pay the remainder 70%. The townships could use their existing funds to defray some of those costs if they choose to encourage that. And then the funding, there's going to be some unusual neighborhoods. If a neighborhood comes in and they've got 2.5 acre lots, we may say, forget it. Because then your $7,000 that we'd be charging them, and it would be, because it's gonna get skewed. If you have 2.5 acre lots, the cost might be $40,000 a home versus 25 or $50,000 a home. At some point, the UPC's gotta say, time out. That kind of development is not amenable to public utility. It's just not density. And it would be, it's too much of an investment into the system to go that far. Connections, we would say the connections are not mandatory. So there could be a situation where you build it in there and you're not going to get your money back until people connect in time. However, you would charge that fee. So in this case, the $7,000 is going to go up through time because that 30, it's based on the actual cost of construction. So 20 years from now, maybe that's double. They would pay $14,000. So the investment that the system would make would theoretically be recouped by that inflated cost or the reimbursement in the future.
So if that homeowner does not want to connect, he does not get charged for any of that infrastructure.
No.
with it.
Yep.
Okay.
But they would pay the fees at the time that they do. So there's a little bit of a cash flow issue there too, because the system could invest $1 million and not get it back in 2 or 3 years. It might be 20 years. But that's sort of how the townships have dealt with sewer and water in the past. And a lot of this is going to be in the townships. Most of it's going to be. They would still pay the system buy-in fee that we just talked about. They would still have to pay for the physical connection from the pipe to the house. That's $6,000. It's not really a fee. That's actually just
That's the cost of the construction, yep.
Yeah.
And Tom, as time goes by and those numbers change, it would also increase the cost for anybody that waits as well.
All the costs I put in here are based on today's dollars and will inflate through time. So really the current approximate cost for each homeowner in this situation is about $14,000. The current cost of the system is $16,300. So it's clearly the system is paying to subsidize the expansion of the system, to have future ratepayers, to expand the system, to have public water out there.
Can I ask a complimentary question? So when you have a neighborhood that's all septic and they agree, 50% of the homeowners agree that they're going to put in sewer, and not everyone wants to tie into that sewer system. They don't want to pay for it. Do you force them to tie into it, Jim? James?
That, the city usually doesn't, deal with that now. We're totally built out. That's usually a township, decision. And right now, that's, individual townships make those decisions based on, the need and the information and everything like that.
So then follow up.
Right. On the sewer side, generally what will happen is unless the township is investing to get it down the street so that there can be future extensions, future connection fees that then would pay back that investment. But for neighborhoods, generally it is either an assessment district where you're going to get your money back, or they build it with mandatory connections where they know they're going to get their money back. Because at a certain point, you still have to cash flow the cost of that.
So you can make it mandatory. That's kind of what.
The townships have the authority to do
Yes,
that.
they could make it mandatory. However, the problem with making it mandatory on the water side is that just makes getting 50% of the people to sign up for it probably impossible. Because if you go and say, everybody in the neighborhood, it's going to cost $14,000 for a well, and you have to connect. Out of 20 people in the neighborhood, you might get 2. You're never going to get 50. But if you take the mandatory side off of that, you might be able to get the people to say, yeah, I support public water and I'll connect when I want to connect.
So then there's a follow-up. Is there a financing, opportunity? Just, yeah, I thought maybe in the sanitary side that you pay it over time, and then when you sell your house, it kind of gets cleaned up then, type thing.
That's what I do, like an assessment.
I would think a township could put in place a special assessment district if there was a desire to assist the citizens, right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a special assessment district, but then they are paying for it regardless of whether they're paying for it through time. Yes, they could do that.
You could do something like that, and even if you didn't connect, you wouldn't be in the district.
And the system also offers, or right now, your $6,000 connection, we will offer payments over 3 years for that. So, the 14,000, weekly policy, that something similar.
So in the special assessment district, people would have to pay for it over the course of 10, 20 years, whether they connect or not. That is definitely an option. The other thing is when they do connect to pay that $7,000, the townships could step in and say, yeah, we will finance that. So we'll pay the city $7,000 on your behalf. You owe us $7,000 over X period of time. They do have that policy generally in the sewer already. A lot of them do for connections. For sewer, I'm not sure for water. You do an optional for water? For connections?
Mark?
Anyway,
Sorry.
that's all right. It's good. That's a
I
possibility.
know sewer right now.
Yeah. So it's a possibility.
Do we offer financing through the township for water?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And what you find is not a lot of people take that up because a lot of people don't like to have another debt out there if they're connecting. And the rates are, for the townships, are generally not favorable versus, well, I don't know. I don't even know what to.
We've made them much more favorable.
Okay.
The long ago treasurers said, we're not a bank, but then that's evolved because we wanted to get people.
I think there's a number of opportunities to finance that for, if you got 50% and 40% need financing, I think that could not be done with a huge issue.
Yeah.
Even outside of the government itself.
The gentleman that called in, last month's meeting to discuss a neighborhood in Comstock, I could see that facilitate where the neighborhood goes to the township and says, we are unfavorable, greater than 50%, we need water. Would the township, enter into, a special assessment district for us to pay the funding and go forward? Because it sounded like that was a cry for, we want the opportunity to spend more than $7,500 for a well because we don't like the well that we have. That is our problem. So it's a source, issue for them. So I think that has merit too, to leave the door open for many opportunities, which then the UPC sits here and looks at it and says, the risk, as Tom was mentioning, of putting money out ahead and trusting that you'll get return on that investment starts to drop off. So I think it's going to be having opportunities for situational need would help this group make those decisions going forward. Do we extend water here or not into said neighborhoods? So the policy is going in the right direction. I think we're looking at how do we protect investment from the city of Kalamazoo long term to get return on that investment too in a timely manner. So
in all of this, the townships are still involved in that interaction with the homeowners, with the neighborhood. We'll be interacting if there's a special assessment district. We'll be interacting if they want to finance. So there's still a lot of township interaction, and that goes back to the surcharges and the township still using that administration fee to be able to operate within the water system. So then it comes to the UPC, the UPC would, look at these on a case by case basis. Again, I don't think we're gonna get dozens of them very quickly. We would then work with the neighborhoods, and they would have to be plugged into the capital improvement plan from two standpoints. Number one, in the system, can the capital improvement plan afford the 70%? Where does that plug in? Can we do it next year? I mean, if you have one neighborhood a year, you could probably fit it in 1 year. And then the other part of it is the gentleman who called in, that neighborhood doesn't have water available, but it is that the water availability is in the capital improvement plan. So if the neighborhood comes in and says, we really need water and we have 50-60%, that might change when you do transmission capital improvement plan, you might move that up. So the need in the towns, in the neighborhoods could inform or change the capital improvement plan that James has just presented.
So I have a question. If we go back to the presentation with the spreadsheet and the tab for township neighborhoods and stuff, I believe the bulk of this that we're addressing would be, the township would have provided that list, having an idea to give that. And so the plan is already set for greater than 70% investment into it. If said neighborhood, that was on that list is already there, planned for in say 2028. So ultimately this too has a potential to lower capital investment, even at a 70% participation at the city's level. Right? Is that a fair assumption?
I'm not sure I'm following it.
All right, so we go back to the large spreadsheet that you shared with us, and you have the tab that is the neighborhoods that, for future plans for in the township for capital improvement. This policy is gonna apply to that. But right now, you have placed, if it's my understanding, you have placed the assumption that is a planned capital improvement at some point in time on the list at the full cost right now.
We did the 300.
Oh, you did the
minus 90.
You did the 70%.
So we did the 70%
at that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, that answered that question.
Follow-up question on the CIP. So you've plugged those in the capital improvement. Those are plugged in. The system contribution is already plugged into that capital improvement plan.
Correct.
That's what I
Correct.
was asking.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I mentioned before. So it's good because the capital improvement plan has those placeholders to allow these to come in. And you don't know what neighborhood, you probably just guessed.
No, I think we just took, so there is system improvements needed with that. The system improvements were prioritized, I think, beginning in 2026 and then kind of sprinkled forward. And then the neighborhood was brought in, probably like 27 or 28 and then sprinkled forward as well.
So we have placeholders in there for neighborhoods as they come in. So that's good.
Yeah. And there is flexibility. I do want to say this, that if a neighborhood or a township comes forward and says, hey, this neighborhood, whatever, we want it, let's do it. We've got flexibility. We could very likely bring that to, next current year. So if somebody walked in today as, a township supervisor with a resolution from the board, this is the neighborhood, we could very likely program that in to begin, an example today in 24.
Right. Now I don't want to lose your analogy as we go. I want us all to focus on turtles. You're saying we grab the turtle and get it raised sooner than what it was planned for at that point.
Yeah, maybe that one
I
will
love
run it backwards.
Yeah,
You
I
grab
love
that
that.
one, you put it right back on the track, you say,
I love
Go.
that analogy.
Yeah.
That was good. So,
Or you got a whole bunch of turtles in the bullpen, you pull one out.
you pull one out, get a new turtle, put it on.
I think townships, from a regional standpoint, will like that opportunity to move forward quicker than maybe what was, planned for before.
But there's still a limitation, I'm sorry, you still have to have the money to do 70%.
Right, there is, I think, broadly speaking, there is enough autonomy and flexibility built into that plan that if a neighborhood needed to be prioritized and the UPC supported that we could make those changes. Now, if every single township and every single neighborhood come in tomorrow with resolutions, then, well, no, it's, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
And that's why you go back to that number. If we were to, if the system would pay 90, if you took it down to $5,000 per home, everybody's going to come in the door. But if you have it $25,000 per home, nobody's coming in the door. So that's why we're trying to and it was James's idea, the greenfield cost, because that's the main cost that, developers, new house, that's what those people are paying to get on the system. So it makes sense that it would be the same for existing neighborhoods, to get on the system. So, so that's all I had, I think. Anybody else on the committee have any other comments?
If I may, I just wondered, I mentioned 2.5 at the last, if you identified these neighborhoods, if you're gonna run into that in these specific neighborhoods.
So in the capital improvement plan that we provided the city, the only ones that we identified were the smaller, more dense, more likely to have water extensions. I'm just talking about the 2.5 acre. Everyone that comes in, this is a policy that we're going to have. It's in, if a neighborhood comes in and it's such that the cost per home is $50,000. So the system is subsidizing for, $40,000 a home. We need to say, does that make sense for the system? Does that make sense for those homes? And at some point it doesn't. And this really fits 90% of those neighborhoods that we're looking at. There's some that are oddball, but they tie into more capital improvement, transmission, distribution stuff that goes through the neighborhood and makes it more expensive. So again, I mentioned that we just wanted to present this to the UPC. Get comments. We will be taking this to regional commission because that's really where a lot of this is going to be taking place in the townships. We get their comments, bring it back to the UPC. Their comments, and we'll. Somebody mentioned maybe put together a flow chart or these are just notes. Put together a policy, put together a flow chart, and we'll figure out how we want to put it together so that it's real clear. And again, the idea is that it's real clear so that when somebody comes in and says, I want one in the neighborhood, you can say, here's what it's going to cost you. Go get 50% of your neighbors to agree to that. And one last thing, I should have mentioned these right off the bat, I apologize. This is for non-emergency. This is for just people who want water. If there's a neighborhood that you have a PFAS hit or out here in Oshkosh, you've got the KLA group, those are off the table. Those we approach those on a case-by-case basis.
So when you see, I'm thinking of a gentleman who called in, it must have been about 4 months ago, I think, who said, we have bad water, we really want water. So would you foresee that person that calls into us, we say, there's a protocol, approach your township, they know what the next steps are.
Yep.
And then the township does everything and brings it, you know what I mean, rather than us doing anything. We just see it at that point where the township says, we have a resolution, we got 50 houses, and that, we would like you to do this. And at that point, we say, yes, move it up or whatever, or, see if it can be moved up, or if there's a pipe right next door, start tomorrow or whatever. But
So basically, here's the program, here's what it's gonna cost. Go get support in your neighborhood, and then bring it back to us, and we'll take it to the UPC.
Right. When you do that, this is what it will cost. Do you save per foot or do you want a $7,000? I just wondered in case, you know.
I'm thinking that based on, we would set a number, $7,000, based
Okay.
on the average cost of the neighborhood cost.
Yeah,
That way it's a known
It's
number.
less confusing.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
no, I think it's great. I just wondered if that'll fit the bill, you know, 7,000, do we say? What is it next year? What is
Well,
it
I think
next year?
just like we see with our services, that $6,000 is the cost for any service anywhere in the system,
Okay,
whether that's,
okay,
you know, a 2-foot service inside the city or a 250-foot far side service out in the township somewhere.
sure.
You know, we've standardized that, you know, and it took a number of years to get there. We operated for a long time where, you know, say you connected and it was $10,000 and I connected and it was $1,000 and it was just all over the map. So we standardized it and it made sense. I think that's probably the same thing we want to do with this. And you'll have your cost to connect, you got your system capacity buy-in fee, you'll have your neighborhood, you know, new water main connection, and it's all going to be standardized, set by policy of the UPC, something we can publish, and then folks will know it. It would be updated from time to time. We might say, look, you know, construction's going really great. These aren't costing what we think they were. You know, should we lower it or should we raise it? You know, stuff's getting more expensive. So I think, you know, like anything, we'll standardize it and then bring it forward to get updated from time to time.
So in that situation where we have that individual called in, I don't even think water is near where they're at, right?
Correct. There's no transmission main available.
So in their instance, is there any solution or until, you know, there's additional growth that gets it near you?
So in that particular situation, there is transmission main planned in the CIP.
Okay,
And that's something that we are really looking to prioritize.
okay,
NAV from roughly 26th Street, well, from Sprinkle Road all the way to 35th Street or 34th Street is a commercial corridor that's currently undergoing significant rapid growth. And that's Pavilion Township on the south, Comstock Township on the north. We're seeing nearly unbound commercial, industrial, manufacturing growth in that area. And so from a water model standpoint, that is an area we've been focused on and that we really want to keep up and put in more looping and some, you know, maybe even a east side tower to help support that area so that we can continue that growth model. So that's something we're prioritizing. We're wanting to pull that forward in CIP. We're having discussions internally to see when that can go sooner. And if that does go sooner to support that commercial growth, then, you know, one of these consequential, you know, wins or benefits would be that neighborhood would then have transmission in front of it. So, you know, that neighborhood is still.
then they would get the 50% and, okay.
Yeah.
Just reference N Avenue is what street?
So N Avenue is like the same as Kilgore in the city,
Kilgore,
and it goes N Ave once
That's
you're
what I
out.
wanted to know.
This development is off ML, which is Miller in the city, but ML in the township. Our looping plan would loop ML back to our Station 39 Lake, and then we will also loop up to M96 in Comstock, run through Galesburg, go 35th Street, all the way south.
That's the road commission
and
and
then around
back
back
to that area,
Yeah.
road commission.
Road Commission just built a new facility on 26th Street, north of N Ave. That's not necessarily. Crab,
Yeah.
a lot of
I'm
expansion.
just trying to get in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a development area known as the Ready Farm that is looked at, you know, if not every year, sometimes multiple times a year by potential developers that always have interest of that area. There's a lot of other farm land that's going from farm straight to commercial in that area. So that's something that we're seeing from a planning standpoint, really looks to be a strong commercial corridor over the next, you know, 20-year period of growth.
Ready's already going up.
Is it? So there you go, yeah.
So your next step is to go to the regional commission and get their notes and then come back and get your group back together if there's any substantive suggestions.
Yep, so we take it to the regional commission, there were some notes here that I took, and we'll put together a final draft and put it in a form that is not just notes, but sort of step by step type of thing.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I would imagine that after the regional commission, we would get together with the subcommittee, maybe one last time to discuss those comments.
Thank you. Next item is yours as well, Tom, the wellhead protection.
Wellhead protection update, I've got two last things, have a discussion with Gene Landa regarding so you got the ordinance, we have the performance standards, discussion on the ordinance, Gene Landa had some comments on there, I need to understand what their comments are, some highlights. To see what she's thinking, and then I'm trying to get a unprotected document for a spill contingency plan so that we can put that in the document. So if somebody needs to put it together, they've got to outline, and that's more. So I would guess that by the end of next week, we will be sending these to the townships to have their attorneys start looking at the ordinances and have them start reviewing the performance standards. And so that sort of lines up. We're hoping to do that at the same time with that contract and opportunity as well. It's all sort of fits together.
Any other questions on that? New business to invoices approval, and we have
I move approval for payment to Pine and Newhoff invoice number 76624. What's the MES word?
a motion by Mary Anderson, support by Mia, to approve the Pine and Newhoff invoice in the amount of $1304.80. Any discussion?
Abstain.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 and 1 abstention.
I move approval of two Radevelt Hefner LLC invoices, invoice numbers 6028 and 6088. I support Escamilla.
Same on the motion and the support. To approve the two redeveloped Hafner invoices in the amount of $733.13 and $1574.08. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0 and 1 abstention.
I asked this morning where the invoice was, and they said, I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
transition, call it.
Okay, start with, guest and attendee comments. Leanne? Okay.
Morning, everyone. This isn't really related to water, but I'm gonna be honest. Didn't want to miss this opportunity. Last week as a relatively new supervisor, but I wanted to send a special shout out. Encourage you and not appreciate enough level of education that you city provided, and we would push that out from our end as well, which just reinforces listening to this conversation, like partnership is so important. So, thank you,
Yeah, thank you.
James. I really appreciate it.
Good, thank you, good meeting.
Anything, Mark? No? Online, any comments? Jeff or Joe, Rich?
I'm all set. This is.
I'm all set,
all
thank you.
Okay.
This is-
Um,
This is Joe. I have no comment.
okay, thank you. Tom?
I'm just letting you know that I'm up going to the Great Lakes Water Infrastructure Conference, and so I don't know if anyone else is going, but yep, I'm looking forward to it.
It's coming right up.
It's next week, Tuesday, I think.
Yep, Tuesday through Thursday.
I won't be at all the meetings, but I'll be at.
No comment?
Nothing.
Don't have anything either.
If I could just provide a real quick, update. I've been working with Ross Township, Eagle, and the, County Health Department. I went to the Ross Township Board meeting in August. We're gonna be back at the Ross Township Board meeting in September 19th. We've, sketched up a, water main extension that would include, Richland Township and Ross Township, to address some PFAS migration that's occurring there. Ross Township is not a current member of this body, and so the contract has specific language on how to address that and what UPC role is in that. So we're going to be presenting that water service area to the board on that meeting. If the board is in favor of that, we've outlined a series of next steps that would have to happen. One of those next steps that would have to happen would be that Ross Township officially would have to address this body and request the expansion, and then likely signatory to that agreement. And there's some more detail involved in terms of whether they become a retail or a wholesale provider. There was work done early on in the contract that identified a future Ross service area that's included in an appendix. It depends on where Ross wants to go. They've indicated some desire to go retail, kind of where the same way we're currently serving Richland. So there's some options there. I want to make sure we present that. The contract has some language in it already. I want to make sure we respect that. Again, this is all related to PFAS and kind of where that PFAS plume is heading. So, I'll have a full update for UPC after our meeting in September.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's it. Matt. Thank
Okay.
you.
So our next meeting is October 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.